When a woman in medieval Europe got attacked by a man and begged the court for justice, the court did not go after him. They stripped her naked, brought in older women to touch her body, and decided she was lying because she failed a virginity check with zero science behind it. And this same thinking still exists today. Everybody assumes this started because of God, the Bible, or some obsession with being holy. It did not. Money built this entire machine, and the reality behind it runs uglier than any sermon ever preached. In medieval Europe, nobody treated women as people. A daughter existed to be sold, a wife existed to be bought, and marriage operated as a business contract that two families signed inside a church. Every contract needs a guarantee, and a woman's body served as that guarantee. Think about what that actually means. A lord has a son who needs a wife. That wife will carry an heir, and that heir will one day control the land, the castle, the title, and the army. What if the wife slept with another man before the wedding? Then maybe the baby belongs to someone else entirely, and a stranger's bloodline ends up sitting on the family throne, commanding an entire kingdom it has no right to. That one fear, that one paranoid thought, built an entire apparatus for inspecting women. Official inspectors received appointments, rules went on record, and final verdicts came down with no appeal and no challenge. All of it rested on a belief that turned out to be completely wrong. The idea that you could look at a woman and somehow read her past from her flesh. You could not. They believed you could, and that belief destroyed millions of lives. Virginity had nothing to do with being a good person. It worked as a property seal, exactly like a wax stamp on an envelope. Break the stamp, and nobody trusts what sits inside. That is precisely how families treated their daughters. Greeks operated this way, Romans did the same. But medieval Europe pushed it further than anyone before, and built an official program with trained inspectors and court-backed verdicts.
And the force that pushed it hardest controlled the center of the entire Western world. We will get to the church in a second, because what they did with this turned a financial problem into a nightmare that lasted 1,000 years. The Catholic Church did not create virginity inspections. They dumped gasoline on them and struck the match. Before church leaders got involved, families demanded proof for one reason only: to protect their investments. Once the church stepped in, everything shifted. A money problem became a sin problem, and priests began telling women that their very souls depended on passing. Church fathers taught that women entered the world already guilty. Sermons called them daughters of Eve, the woman who dragged sin into existence. Saint Jerome, one of the loudest voices in early Christianity, preached something that would echo across 1,000 years of human history. He declared that a woman's only path to God moved straight through her virginity. Lose it before marriage, and God treated her as destroyed, not just in front of her neighbors, but at the gates of heaven itself. Now imagine hearing that when you are 12 years old. Each Sunday, you sit in a pew in 1320 France, while the priest stands at the front and tells every woman in the building that her skin is dangerous, that her flesh is a trap, and that the only thing standing between her and eternal damnation is her purity. You absorb this every week for years. It sinks into your bones. By the time you reach marrying age, you accept that your entire value as a human being depends on one part of your anatomy, and so does your mother, your father, your future husband, and every person you have ever known. That belief created a demand that spread across all of Europe. Families wanted proof, husbands wanted proof, courts wanted proof, and the church wanted proof. One enormous problem sat right in the middle of all of it, a problem that nobody wanted to admit out loud. Nobody actually knew how to check for it. So they invented methods from scratch, and what they came up with will make your stomach turn. What you are about to hear is not fiction. All of these methods touched real girls and real women inside real rooms for hundreds and hundreds of years. The first and most common method, called the naked inspection, worked like this. A group of older women, usually midwives or nuns, would pull the girl into a private space, strip off every piece of clothing, and move their bare hands across every inch of her skin. Inspectors checked her complexion because tradition taught that virgins glowed with lighter, almost white coloring. Fingers squeezed her chest because tradition taught that a virgin's breasts pointed upward and stayed firm. Those same fingers then moved between her legs, searching for signs that meant absolutely nothing in medical terms. Not a single one of those signs contained any truth. Mothers handed them to daughters, midwives handed them to students, and each generation pushed the same wrong information forward with total confidence. Ignorance traveled in a chain that stretched back centuries, and nobody ever paused to check whether any of it actually worked. Results proved exactly how broken the whole process operated. 2 different matrons could look at the exact same girl on the exact same day and reach opposite conclusions. One would declare pure, the other would declare impure, and that girl's entire future would hang on whichever woman the family decided to trust. Standards did not exist, training manuals did not exist, and science played absolutely no part in any of it. That first method, however, only scratches the surface. What came next slides even deeper into madness. Medieval doctors, men who studied at universities and earned real degrees, claimed they could detect virginity in a cup of urine. Their teaching stated that a virgin sample came out clear, sparkling, and almost shimmering in the light, while the sample from a woman who slept with a man appeared dark and cloudy. Some of these physicians dropped crushed herbs into the sample, watched for color changes, wrote long papers on what they observed, and published entire books on the subject. University professors assigned those books to their classes, and whole careers revolved around staring at women's urine and guessing at purity. The third method, called fumigation, is the one that truly breaks your brain. Officials would seat a woman directly over a pot of boiling herbs, usually garlic, myrrh, and other strong spices. Hot steam would rise straight up into her. Then the women conducting the procedure would lean in close and smell her breath. If her breath smelled like the herbs, she failed. According to the matrons, her insides stayed open, which meant the steam traveled all the way through her like a chimney from bottom to top. If her breath showed no scent, she passed because her insides remained sealed shut. Read that one more time and let it register. Behind all of this sat an idea that a woman's insides formed a hollow tube, and that virginity acted as the plug keeping it closed. Girls perched over those boiling pots while steam scorched their skin, and grown women hovered above them, sniffing their breath like dogs hunting for a scent. If any one of those women thought she caught a whiff of garlic, that girl's life ended right there, with no appeal and no second chance. Number 4, the grain method defied all logic. In certain parts of Europe, matrons forced the girl to swallow a piece of wheat or barley, then stood around and watched her try to urinate. If she went normally, she passed, and if she struggled, she failed. Nobody could explain why this method existed because not a single shred of logic supported it, just old superstition wrapped in official language. Most disturbing thing about all 4 of these methods, however, goes beyond how insane they sound. It comes down to who actually performed them. Women did this to other women, and that part of this story hits the hardest. This is the part that haunts me the most. The matrons almost always came from the same communities as the girls standing in front of them. Midwives, nuns, and respected older women commanded total control over every girl who walked through that door. When the matron spoke one word, pure, the girl walked out with her whole life ahead of her. A good husband, a safe home, a family that kept its honor. Say impure instead, and everything collapsed in seconds. Her marriage died, the family bore public shame through the entire town, and the girl either ended up locked in a convent, thrown into the streets, or handed a punishment that cut even worse. Everything came down to one woman's guess, one woman's opinion, built on myths that traveled from older women to younger women for centuries, and nobody anywhere in that chain ever got it right. Psychologists call this lateral violence, which is what happens when oppressed people start enforcing the rules of their own oppression on each other. These matrons bore no evil intentions, and that is what makes this so difficult to accept. In their minds, they served as protectors. Each one endured the same procedure when young. Each one made it through, and each one saw herself continuing a sacred tradition. They believed they guarded those girls. In reality, they served as wardens. The men who designed the whole apparatus never laid a finger on any of those girls, never stepped inside the building, and never dirtied their hands. Lords and church officials wrote the rules, handpicked the matrons, and walked away clean. Sociologists call this control by proxy,
which means using members of the same group you dominate to do the dominating for you. Men at the top kept spotless reputations, while the machinery underneath operated dirty, and it hummed so smoothly that nobody thought to challenge it. Sometimes, though, this machinery went beyond wrecking a girl's future. Sometimes it wiped out her life completely. In 1384, a young woman in northern Italy found herself dragged into a courtroom because her new husband told the judge she did not come to the marriage bed as a virgin. The court ordered an immediate inspection, and 2 matrons arrived to conduct it. Their conclusions, though, split down the middle. One declared pure, the other declared impure. So a 3rd matron came in, and she sided with impure. 2 against 1. The young woman screamed that it amounted to a lie. She begged the judge, she swore before God, and nobody listened to a single word that left her mouth. Officials stripped her naked in the public square, placed her on the back of a donkey, and paraded her through the streets of her own town, while the crowd beat her with rods. Children pointed and laughed. Neighbors she grew up with threw rotten food at her face as she passed. When the spectacle ended, her family paid a fine, her marriage vanished from the record, and guards locked her inside a convent for the rest of her days. She never married, never bore a child, and never breathed a single free breath on this earth again. All of that because of a steam procedure and a guess. What happened in cases of assault proved even more twisted, and this is the part that made me stop and just sit with this story for a while. When a woman accused a man of attacking her, the court did not go after him first. Officials went after her. Matrons stripped her down and conducted the exact same procedures. Results pointing to virginity before the attack might convince the court to believe her story, but results pointing the other direction meant the court assumed she lied and that she invited it. A woman suffers an attack, begs for justice, and the entire legal apparatus puts her on trial instead of her attacker. Inside royal families, the consequences stretched even further. A princess who failed her inspection could shatter an alliance between 2 kingdoms overnight. Treaties could collapse, trade agreements could dissolve, and thousands of soldiers could end up bleeding out on a battlefield, all because a midwife thought she caught a whiff of garlic on a princess's breath. Medieval politics never produced a deadlier weapon than an old woman's nose. The craziest part of this entire story still sits ahead, because some people actually knew the truth the whole time and stayed quiet. As early as the 1200s, a small group of physicians began saying exactly what everyone should have already figured out on their own. The inspections meant nothing. These doctors pointed out that skin color showed no connection to virginity. They proved that urine reflected nothing more than diet and hydration, and they called the fumigation method exactly what it deserved to be called: pure fantasy with zero connection to how the human body actually functions. One of the loudest voices belonged to a German scholar named Albertus Magnus, and people considered him one of the sharpest minds alive during that century. He wrote openly that the so-called signs of virginity meant nothing whatsoever, and that flesh simply did not operate the way the matrons claimed. He brought the proof, he brought the reasoning, and he brought centuries of observable evidence to back it up. Nobody cared about his findings, not the universities, not the courts, and certainly not the church. Professors kept teaching the old methods because their own professors taught them the same thing. Midwives kept conducting the old procedures because their mothers did it before them. Courts kept accepting the old verdicts because questioning those verdicts meant questioning the entire power structure. One man's truth, no matter how obvious, could not compete with 1,000 years of comfortable lies. Because if the inspections did not work, then the entire apparatus collapsed. Families lost the ability to certify their daughters. Husbands lost their guarantee on wives. Courts lost their tool for settling disputes. And the church lost its grip on women's fear. Every group in power needed this lie to stay breathing. So the doctors who spoke the truth found themselves laughed at, pushed to the margins, and erased from memory, while the fake procedures continued for another 400 years. Now, if this story is changing the way you think about history, about who controls power and how they keep it, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the ending of this story lands somewhere you will not expect. One question still hangs over everything. How does something this absurd survive for more than 10 centuries?
The answer runs simple, and it rests at the darkest core of this whole story.
Every person who sat in power gained something from it, and the only people who suffered owned no voice at all. Fathers commanded a higher price for their daughters on the marriage market. A certified girl meant a better dowry and a stronger family alliance. Husbands gained peace of mind because a certified wife erased all doubt about bloodlines and inheritance. The church gained obedience because the inspections proved their moral teachings mattered and kept women living in constant fear. And the state gained order because family disputes stayed settled, social structures remained locked in place, and women stayed under control. Sociologists call this structural complicity, which describes the moment when every institution in a society quietly agrees to keep an injustice running because tearing it apart would cost all of them something. What about the women? They lacked the right to write laws, to serve in court, to publish books, or to stand before a judge and call the whole thing insane. All they could do involved standing in a cold room with arms pressed to their sides, eyes fixed on the floor, waiting for some stranger to decide whether they possessed any value at all. This machinery survived because the only people who wanted it gone owned no power to shut it down. A young girl could scream, she could cry, she could grab her mother's arm and beg her to keep her out of that room. Her mother, the same woman who stood in that exact same spot when she herself came of age, would squeeze her daughter's hand and whisper that it would end soon, to just stand still and try to stay brave. That mother understood something her daughter had not yet learned. Refusing the procedure brought punishment far worse than anything the matrons could deliver. Refusing meant guilt, it meant suspicion, and the consequences of suspicion crushed harder than any verdict. The trap offered no exit. Walk through that door and survive, or turn around and face destruction. That is not just ancient history. That is a pattern, and it still runs right now. You probably assumed this died with the Middle Ages. It did not come close to dying. Virginity inspections survived the Renaissance, survived the Enlightenment, survived the Industrial Revolution, and survived both world wars. According to the World Health Organization, at least 20 countries around the world still practice this today. It happens before weddings, during police investigations, inside military recruitment offices, and as part of government job screenings. Same humiliation, same invasion, and the same zero science behind every result. Right now, in 2026, young women find themselves forced onto tables while strangers probe them using methods that doctors proved completely worthless over 800 years ago. 8 centuries of proof that none of this means anything, and it continues anyway. A different country, a different century, yet the exact same cold room. In 2018, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and UN Women came together and officially declared virginity inspections a human rights violation, a form of gender-based violence with absolutely no medical validity. A declaration typed on paper does not lock a door.